People ask me, well, why didn't others in the U.S. government believe you? Why didn't they accept what you were saying? Some analysts would say, well, it doesn't fit with all the other things we're seeing, the more sophisticated intelligence that we're getting. Back in Washington, a lesson I learned was that as they become more senior in government positions, analysts and officials become convinced of their own assessment of what's going on and their own take on the world. And almost everyone in a senior level of the US government who worked on Indochina, Vietnam, Cambodia, had believed, and they were accurate in their belief, that Vietnam called all the shots in Laos, in Cambodia, and of course in Vietnam. But they weren't prepared to see something new. They didn't seem open to having a whole new interpretation, one that undercut all of their own judgments that they had made over years and years. And here's some young 31-year-old kid out on the Cambodian border reporting on this. How does that compare to all the CIA analysts, intelligence community analysts, other foreign policy officials who had been 15, 20, 30 years working on these issues, and all of whom had their take? And so my report, while it wasn't suppressed in any way, and it got out and everybody could see it, just people weren't open-minded and prepared to accept it and to have it become an active part of what they were considering. Years later, I was at an event, a birthday party for Henry Kissinger, long after he was no longer Secretary of State. And it was individuals who had served with him at the National Security Council, and I was just on the edge there. And as he's walking out, he comes over to me, and he grabs me by my arm, my left arm, and he says to me, "Your reporting on Cambodia was brilliant." So it's long after the time, but to have someone so incredibly insightful, the master diplomat, to say that to me and to recognize my reporting, that meant a lot. And that was a sense of vindication. When I was being interviewed to join the Foreign Service, there's a written test and then you have an oral interview. And I'm sitting across the table from 3 diplomats, and they're asking me, what's your vision for what you're going to be able to do in foreign affairs? So I was, 24-year-old kid from Dubuque, and they were wondering, do I think I'm going to be Secretary of State? I'm going to be ambassador? And I said to them, well, my hope would be that maybe in some way in a State Department career, I might become a footnote to history. Maybe there'd be some event, some negotiation, something that I would be involved in. Maybe it might get a mention in a footnote. On page 909 of book History of the American People, traces the history of our country from the 1600s to the end of the 20th century. There's a reference to reports submitted by Kenneth Quinn along the border of Vietnam and Cambodia, verifying the Khmer Rouge. So I had my moment. I have my footnote to history.